It's funny,
Face.
like I get this, and I've talked about this many times. Like, what do you do? I do digital marketing for lawyers. Oh my gosh, right? The people who don't know. But lawyers honestly make really amazingly good clients. They make great clients. And there are a couple of reasons. I grew up on the East Coast. Despite the fact that I'm in kind of bleeding heart Seattle, I like the bluntness. I like the candor. I like the fast pace. I like when it escalates to like respected disagreement. Like I like that stuff, and that doesn't turn me off. Lawyers are ambitious, and I think a lot of times lawyers get painted with you guys don't understand business, you don't understand technology, I don't buy that at all. There are law firms who get it. There are law firms who are figuring out. There are florists who get it. There are veterinarians who get it, right? And so I love working with lawyers. And the other part of it that I don't think I remember when this happened to me, looking at the legal industry from the outside. Most people hate lawyers, but they like their lawyer, right?
Welcome to the Renegade Lawyer Podcast, the show where we ask the questions, why aren't more lawyers living flourishing lives and inspiring others? And can you really get wealthy while doing only the work you love with people you like? Many lawyers are. Get ready to hear from your host, Ben Glass, the founder of the law firm Ben Glass Law in Fairfax, Virginia, and Great Legal Marketing, an organization that helps good people succeed by coaching, inspiring, and supporting law firm owners. Join us for today's conversation.
Hey everybody, this is Ben. This is the Renegade Lawyer Podcast, where, as you know, each episode I get to interview interesting people inside and outside of legal who are making a ding in the world. Today's going to be a fun one. What you probably don't know is we just hit record on some of these, with guys or gals who I know well, have known for a long time. We don't exchange questions in advance. We just got hit record. And in fact, Conrad, if we had hit record 90 seconds earlier, we could have had a great video of you.
Which would have been even better, because I had just said, I hate it when technology doesn't work, and then kaplooey.
Boom. So Conrad Saam is, of course, well-known president of Mockingbird Marketing. Started at Avvo back in the day. His two favorite companies are Google and FindLaw. We'll talk a little bit about that. By the way, disclaimer, these are opinions we're expressing here. But Conrad, I feel like you and I get to talk every week because the podcast that you do with Guy Sakalakis, Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, is really like just being in the room with two guys who happen to be competitors, great friends, just discussing stuff that I think is really relevant and important to the folks who listen to this podcast, which is the solo and small firm market, the guys and gals who typically are not spending tens of thousands of dollars a month on anything, let alone a specific vertical like, paid advertising or even SEO and stuff like that. So I have picked up a lot. I ping you with questions, with bad questions that you try to answer, even though it's asynchronous questions and answers. And so I appreciate that. But I think that you and Guy do a really good job. It is literally, honestly, one of my favorite podcasts. And it is one of those that I listen to as soon as the episode is released, as soon as I can listen to it. So hey,
I'm super psyched to be here. I am not good at a lot of things. I love talking marketing, right? Like if this was all I did, if it was just the talking part, that's the dream job for me. But there's other parts of running a business, which we'll talk about, I'm sure.
That social media question, what could you get up and talk on for 30 minutes with no prep? This is be one of them. Well, very good. Well, let's just start with your podcast with Guy, because I noticed it when it first was born, and it did not surprise me, but you two are competing in the marketplace for web services, web design, SEO, web advice, marketing advice, all of that stuff. So can you take us inside the dinner conversation or whatever it was that said, hey, I have this, one of you said,
well, Guy invited me to join, and I was like, so it's owned, the pod is owned by the Little Talk Network, and so full disclosure, they do all of the hard work. This is my perfect situation. We show up, we plan for an hour, we talk for an hour, and then that's it. So they do all of the hard stuff. And Guy had this, opportunity, and he was like, why don't you join me? And I was like, are you sure you want me, of all people, to sit down and join you? And he was like, yeah, of course. And, Guy and I have very similar companies. We have very similar businesses. I think one of the things that's a little bit in vogue is to talk about like collaboration and sharing stuff in masterminds. And we have I mean, it's two of us, but we share all sorts of stuff from like tactical SEO stuff. We're trying to get our teams together to like talk about what they're doing. It makes the intelligence of my firm larger, but like I share my P&L with a guy, like a direct competitor on the regular, because I'm always learning from him and he's always learning from me. And the other thing, Ben, and I hate to say this, but like the industry's not great. The agency world that's serving law firms, it's not really great. And so we've kind of gone completely open with each other and almost to the exclusion of other opportunities, like to other relationships in the agency world. But it's been super valuable. It's weird. I know it's a weird relationship, but it works. And we were at the University of Michigan at the same time and didn't know each other.
Well, look, so folks, you could like turn the podcast off now and just think about what you just heard, because it is brilliant. It is not sharing for sharing's sake, but it's sharing when you understand that the market is vast. America is the best place ever, like to be running a small business, and you will learn more. Like for years, Conrad, said to local PI lawyers in Northern Virginia, like, come over, we'll show you everything. Like, we'll show you everything that we do. And some taking us up on that. Sometimes we've grown competitors for sure. But the reality is we learn more and we have an impact on the market and we learn more. And what you said there was very important. Like your team's education gets broader because it's not all coming just through you, right? And that's an important part of, I think, masterminds, and bring your team to masterminds and bring your team to some of these seminars and conferences that we go to. So,
and I feel like if you're part of a mastermind with a group, and you probably know this better than I do, that you see people's development over time. It's almost like you're running 4 or 5 different companies, right? Like you have the expertise and the experience and the heartache and the wins of multiple companies. It's like you are doing this entrepreneur thing 4 times, 5 times at the same time instead of just once.
And if you're into, in this case, learning about marketing, but more importantly, learning about personal growth, business growth, which is really agnostic to the vertical that you're in, then things like masterminds, things like the collaboration that you and Guy are doing are just invaluable. And they're rare. They're relatively rare. As many masterminds as you and I now see advertised out there in the legal world, it's still a rare event. Like there's still so many lawyers who've never heard of you, never heard of me, never heard of Guy, never heard of Mike Mogul, or any of these names. It's amazing, right? And so the market is big. So do you know, like, have you and Guy seen an uptick in leads or inquiries or clients, do you think, because of the podcast? Has that been effective at that end for you?
So it is one of many touch points that we have. And it's, in some cases, it's the only touch point. Like people only know me from this. I go to conferences now and people know me from the podcast, which is weird. But in many cases, it's like another touch point, or it's another thing where it's like, this is someone that we've been talking to for 7 years, right? And it's a way to continuously hang around in their brain. And I was literally just talking to my coach about this. We've never been successful at outbound sales, and I don't really ever. Maybe I want to be. Maybe it'd be great, but like I would much rather have people talking to us, who know the way we think, where it's not like a really awkward first blind date when we're doing that pitch, the initial discovery call, but it's like a conversation that is continuing on from stuff that they've heard about us and our perspective for, in some cases, years.
That's a very interesting observation, because there are some in the coaching space who are really good at coaching and teaching on sales and sales closing and sales conversions. And I've always said, like, I suck at that, right? But I'm a really good marketer, I think, right? Or decent anyway. So that when people come, the conversation really is exactly what you said. It's a continuation of a conversation. We've already entered the conversation that's in their head. And and frame the issue in the law firm space. Frame the issue: is your case like good enough to come into
Right.
the Bengals law space and for us to represent you? Because I would suck at outbound cold marketing or sales and
And there are
closing and things
agencies
like
that do
that.
very well with this, right? So like it's not a terrible challenge. It's just for me and for what we do and the way I like to think, like I also, if you have a sales function, you're trying to close sales, right? Instead of like, are we a good fit? Like, is what you need and what we do, are those two things? Is there at least an 80% Venn diagram overlap on that? And if there is, like, let's keep talking. And if there's not, like, I don't want to try and push those circles together to try and make it work.
Do you ever regret choosing at some point in your life to serve the lawyer
No,
market versus
no,
taking your skills to serve
not at all. I,
any other
it's funny,
space?
like, I get this, and I've talked about this many times. Like, what do you do? I do digital marketing for lawyers. Oh my gosh, right? The people who don't know. But lawyers honestly make really amazingly good clients. They make great clients. And there are a couple of reasons. I grew up on the East Coast. Despite the fact that I'm in kind of bleeding heart Seattle, I like the bluntness. I like the candor. I like the fast pace. I like when it escalates to like respected disagreement. Like I like that stuff, and that doesn't turn me off. Lawyers are ambitious, like, and I think a lot of times lawyers get painted with the like, you guys don't understand business, you don't understand technology, you don't. I don't buy that at all. There are law firms who get it. There are law firms who are figuring out. There are florists who get it. There are veterinarians who get it, right? And so I love working with lawyers. And the other part of it that I don't think I remember when this happened to me, looking at the legal industry from the outside, most people hate lawyers, but they like their lawyer, right? That's the kind of cute little key. Because I've been in here for so long, I see the legal system, the institution to be a counterpoint to the awful crap that can happen in the country. Well, we won't even go in the world, but in the country. So you've got the worst day of your life. Your spouse is, slept with a pool boy. You've been hit by a car. The tax guy's coming. Like systemically, the legal industry is the counterbalance to all of the awful crap that can happen if you are Black and pulled over by the police, if you are poor and don't have access to resources, in some cases, not always. If you're a business getting screwed by someone, like the legal industry is the backdrop. And I've had the opportunity to see that and respect that. Now, are all my clients doing amazing, wonderful Superman things? No, but like that's the part that I get to play in. And I love it because of that.
Do your clients run the gamut? Certainly, a lot of your clients are
Yeah.
consumer facing, directly consumer facing, PI lawyers, criminal defense lawyers, whatever. Do you have clients who are really corporate
No,
facing?
it's one of those business
Not at
school
all.
conversations where it's like, oh, here's this whole nother market that we could go after and we should target them because they've got deep pockets and blah, blah, blah. But like, it's a different purchase cycle. It's a different consideration set. If you are a corporate law firm, you're not starting with, need M&A lawyer. You're not going to Google with, top M&A lawyer in Sheboygan, right? You're just not. You've already got that figured out. And so it's a very different mindset. Now, they are much more sophisticated in general on CRM. They're much more sophisticated and some of them are much more sophisticated on automation than consumer facing law. So there is some stuff that we can learn from that group. But by and large, like outside of LinkedIn and a website that shows a good result when someone searches for Bill Smith attorney, it's just not that important.
When you were in college, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
When I went into this is going to show you how naive I was. My career paths were veterinarian, professional jazz musician, and I thought in the US becoming a professional rugby player would be a really good move. So I was as naive as you could possibly get. I had no clue. And even when I left college with a sense of like, we send kids, and this is happening today, although we're starting to question it. We send kids to college to figure out what they want to do. And I remember at graduation, I was like, uh-oh, like what class did I miss where we were supposed to do that part? Because I have no idea what I'm going to do. And no one wants to employ someone with like an economics degree. Like no one's drawing marginal cost curves as their first job out of college. And it was like, I left college just like, I have no idea.
You got your MBA at the University of Michigan. Was that a direct path from the university, or did you
It was
have
2 years out. So
a
I
job?
left college. I worked for a guy. Your listeners may find this funny. I worked for a guy who had just gotten his MBA from Cornell. He was the fourth generation in a company. And my now wife was dating a guy who also went to the same school at Cornell, right? And so I got a US News and World Report book on top MBA schools, and I drew my line at Cornell, and I looked at all the schools above Cornell because I was petty. But that was my second plan. My first plan was, honestly, I was going to go into the OCS for the Marines. And then I got super lucky and got into Michigan. And, that's one of those forks in the roads where you have no idea where your life was going to go.
But you had choices if you were going to go to graduate school, because maybe you still could have gone and become a veterinarian, which is an awesome profession. So I have a daughter who's a dog groomer. So
Yeah.
out of high school, no college degree, struggled a lot, adopted at 11, makes healthy six figures, and more than a couple of my kiddos with
Right.
4-year, tens of $1,000 degrees. So there's a space there. But that's another investment, like MBA investment of a couple of years and a bunch of money. Did you have a vision at that point?
Besides the girl, no. I mean, I left business. So I was the youngest person in my business school class, which was a really huge asset because I got to learn from all these people a ton. Like in my grad school class, we had a pilot from Air France. We had a Navy SEAL who ran Eastern Europe for all of the SEALs. We had, we had these amazing people, and I had like finished puberty a couple weeks earlier, and it was like so awesome because I got to learn from all of these amazing people more than I'm not sure anyone learned anything from me, but I got to have all of these experiences from all these amazing people. But then I left and I was like, okay, I like technology. I like entrepreneurship. But the reality has been my experience is most MBAs, the MBA is the least risky degree you could possibly get. And most people who go and get an MBA are not entrepreneurial by nature. They may think they are, but ultimately they're making a very low risk decision. You get an MBA, that is a smart, obvious, easy degree that is going to pay off. And I believe that. But that self-selects out people who are like, well, I would be better off spending the next 2 years and $80,000 trying to start a company or learn of this, and so it weeds out what I will call genuinely entrepreneurial people. And for better or worse, it didn't weed me out. But I find MBAs to be risk averse, like lawyers. They struggle to be entrepreneurial, right? They really do. And think about the great technology, businesses that have come out. The visionary, the leadership of that rarely is sitting on an MBA, right? Now, they may employ a whole bunch of them, and that's the getting stuff done thing, blah, blah, blah. But like, it's rarely someone who is. I had this business school professor at B school who said, if you're not dancing on the edge of silliness, you aren't doing anything really revolutionary. And I remember that. And I was like, I live on the edge of silliness. Right. And so, but I don't think that resonated with anyone else.
It's amazing that he was still allowed.
He was great. Yeah. And he was the guys, and everyone wanted to be entrepreneurial, but people would say to me at business school, like, I'd love to start a company. I just don't have any ideas. And I was like, I've got 50 ideas today. Right.
So several years after MBA school, you make your way to Avvo, and director of marketing at Avvo from 2006 to 2011. I remember when I first met Mark Britton, he was in DC, came by to visit many years ago. And Avvo was a thing back in the day. I mean, it was for a while there a force. What I'm curious as to what your learning was, because you said that in MBA school, you were like surrounded. Now, my question is, did you appreciate it at the time?
It was amazing. It was amazing.
Realize what a gift
it was. It's like when people are like, "Oh, surround yourself with people who are smarter than you," and I was like, "Nailed it!" Right? It was amazing. It was the best experience, best 2 years of my life by far. Yeah,
that's cool. That's cool. So then, what was the learning at Avvo? Because that must have been that was, obviously it was new, but the genre really was new.
cool. I was so lucky to get recruited into that company at the time that I did. And it was so lucky for me to have a couple of connections. And so what happened is I had a friend who was the CMO at Zillow. He was from business school, right? And so the guy who started Zillow financed Avvo, who's also the guy who started Expedia. Okay. So lots of money going around. And I get hit up by this headhunter, and I connect the dots. And I said to my friend at Zillow, I'm like, listen, can you just prep me for my interview? And I went over and we split a 6-pack of beer, and he taught me everything at that point in time you needed to know about SEO. And the next day I went in and I looked like a genius because I'd spent, 2 hours learning SEO from my buddy Mark. But I didn't it was literally 2 hours of information, right? I could tell you the theory, I could tell you what it was, but I had no hands-on experience at all. The good thing is that Seattle, for whatever reason, was full of really high-end SEO nerds. And it was a community at that point in time. And so Vanessa Fox was here. Todd Friesen was here. Rand Fishkin was here. And they invited me into this community, and I got to learn from all of these people who had these were the non-MBAs, right? These were the people who had used technology to make a ton of money, had made a ton of mistakes, had learned a bunch of things, were sharing it. It was this big, beautiful, open community, and it was awesome. And at that time, no one in legal was doing it well except for Justia. Tim Stanley at Justia, who originally started FindLaw, sold it to Thomson Reuters, and then hated them and started his firm Justia instead. So Tim Stanley and I were the only two people who knew anything about SEO in legal for a very long time. So Avvo was able to kill it, not because I was brilliant, but because I was surrounded by a bunch of people who were feeding me the how to do it, and nobody else knew what they were doing. And so that was amazingly powerful. And the other thing, Ben, and this is maybe a little bit twisted, but as kind of my role grew there, I used to field the questions and the complaints from lawyers about Avvo, or you review us online, you can't do that. We're a profession. It's a noble profession. You can't do that. And you're like, you don't know how the web works, and B, I got this experience of interfacing with angry lawyers, and I loved it. It was awesome. So,
how did the director of marketing end up fielding
we were small. I was the 6th hire there. And, when we launched, we would get these complaints, and we eventually hired a woman named Kristen who ran our customer success team, which was basically at the time just answering the phone. And sometimes that phone call was an angry lawyer. And if she had enough, she passed them up to me. And because no one else was doing that's the entrepreneurial thing. There was no one else filling that seat. So I was like, okay, someone's got to take it. And for whatever reason, I loved it.
What do you think was the smartest thing that Avvo did, for itself as a business? And what do you think the smartest thing Avvo did for lawyers?
The number one was obviously rating lawyers. That was an SEO genius move, because as soon as you rate lawyers on a scale of 1 to 10, you're going to get sued. So Avvo planned on getting sued before they launched, right? And that was a PR move, but it was really a link building move, which was awesome, because what I got to do was see, we were covered by the New York Times 4 days after we launched, because we got sued 3 days after we launched. And that wasn't by accident. And then when the New York Times covered us, my job, I just reached out, and it was like, here's my pitch. This is a new website that has raised $3 million, which is not a lot of money. And they're rating lawyers, and lo and behold, they got sued, right? And so I reached out to all of these. It was a planned press opportunity, and that happened, right? And so we got sued. And then we had all these influential bloggers who hated, or who all wanted to weigh in. So this goes way back when there were, I don't know, when Kevin's Lex blog was a really tiny little company, but you could identify all the people who were talking about technology and the law over blogs. And I reached out to all of them, and some of them hated me. And I would have these long, heated conversations, which always turned into an article and a link back to Avvo. So we were killing the SEO game. It was awesome. It was so much fun. It's so twisted, but I loved every moment of it.
Well, it's not really twisted. It is.
It was
brilliant.
It was so much fun, Ben. I talk about I like talking. That's what I did. I talked and I generated links, and it was amazing.
The easiest thing ever. You recently have, on some of your social media, talked about Mockingbird and sort of the difference between a year ago or so and now, and
Yeah.
your use of EOS and just getting the team, I think, my words
Yeah.
now, more organized. As you know, we are huge fans. Brian and I use EOS Entrepreneur Operating System from the book Traction in both of our businesses, the
Yep.
law firm and in Great Legal Marketing, and it benefited a lot. I don't know. If I recall, I may have been the one to convince you to go get a coach. But talk about that for a moment, because so many you're established company, you're doing good stuff, and everyone who listens to this knows, like, running a
Right.
business can be really hard. Like, you can have highs that are highs, lows that are lows. The entrepreneur, you're wearing
Yep.
the weight of all of that on your shoulders every single day. You're often the first in, the last to leave, and sometimes the last to get paid. But talk to us a little bit fundamentally, you think, of what has changed inside of Mockingbird as a
Yeah.
business operating system, so to speak. Because it's not like you went out and
Nope.
discovered the next new SEO magic
Nope.
black hat, white hat trick, right? But you've changed something. And so I think listeners would be interested in hearing what you did, and obviously
Yeah.
lots of other companies who are using Traction
So
have
the
done.
funny thing is, go back to my MBA roots. I'm a little bit arrogant. And I was like, I don't need some third party template of how to run a business because I have an MBA. And I don't need someone telling me about CFO stuff because I have an MBA, right? And we self implemented it for a while and it was fine, but it never really fundamentally shifted who we were. And
You don't know what you don't
that's
know when you're
so
self-implementing.
you and I had a conversation about getting someone as a coach to do this. And I talked to a lot of people about it, but you're right. It was the catalyst that changed everything. And so we, about a year ago, and by the way, these people are very expensive. We hired a third party integrator. And I think, which forces you to take EOS, we were doing it, I don't want to call it as like a side hustle, but it was not, there was no discipline or accountability pushed into it because we were holding ourselves disciplined and accountable to varying degrees of it. And it wasn't until I brought on an integrator, third party, and it's shifted everything. It has completely shifted everything. And for the listener, if you're like, oh, is this something I should think about? I will tell you, for me, the reason it was everything is I knew I had problems that I was not confronting. I knew we had issues that I preferred not to deal with because they were hard. And it was very much, the ostrich with his head in the sand. It's not like these were issues that I discovered because of EOS, but I dealt with them because of EOS. And by the way, we're not done. We're not even close to done. The accountability of a really good coach is so unbelievably valuable. And I think you have to get a really good coach. I don't think you want someone who's just figuring this out. And I hate to say this, but like, this is don't get Michael Jordan to coach the team, right? Because otherwise you need someone who's gonna, that taskmaster, that accountability person, that person who's gonna hold me accountable for, like, I keep pushing things off and she won't let me. It's awesome. It's so good.
Well, we self-implemented for about like a week. And then I figured I
Right.
didn't know what I was doing, right? Because I was just reading one chapter ahead in the book. And, you know, internally at the law firm, we've been doing it for a bit longer than at Great Legal Marketing. And we've had some of the rawest, I wouldn't say fierce, but challenging discussions in the room with some, in our case, my son and others who you're working very closely with. And it's beautiful, if that's the right word for it, because the promise that you make to each other, and it took some time to get the right leadership team too. Like,
Yes.
we churned through leadership team, but the promise you make is that we're going to debate, we're going to be honest with each other, we're going to ask questions with the intent to know the answer, not the intent to
Right.
serve an agenda necessarily. But when we walk out, we're going to be aligned. There's not going to be a conversation in the hall about, undermining the decision we just made. And that too can be hard sometimes. have you done you've done your 2-day
Yep. And in
offsite
fact,
annuals?
I'm leaving on Wednesday night to do another one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Those have been amazingly fun and deep experiences for us. So good for you for doing that. And I think, my analogy is you're between a $10 a month gym and a $300 a
Right.
month CrossFit gym or something like the one you're investing a ton in, you're going to show up and do it. And you just don't want to show up, I think, unprepared. So good for you on that.
And again, I feel like we're just at the beginning. Like I've often felt like we're a company in puberty and we've just figured it out. And we're now it's opening up. Right. And it's very exciting.
Well, let me tell you what the good news and the bad news is. What we have discovered is as you grow, you always are in puberty because you grow to a space that you've never been in before. You've not been a leader at that level. You may not have the right people at that level. And you're in the talent search, you're in the processes search. And as the leader, you're going out to learn things that you never, even though you have your fancy MBA, right? You've never had to deal with before. And so, but we think this is fun because it is new learning, right? It's just, and guys like us, people like us, we're kind of addicted to new learning. Like, let's go. School's never out. So it never gets to easy street. It's just different. It's different issues, but they're fun to learn and then to go and try to solve. And Brian would say, my son would say, like, well, that's because you're the eternal optimist, and like you see growth and opportunity, and even even the hardest discussions that we've had. And I'm pointing now to our training center rooms, like he said to me once, like, is there anything ever that's horrible? I said, well, death, sudden unexpected death, that would be horrible. But outside of that,
part of me is like, I feel like you have to have a level of irrational optimism to own a company. Cause otherwise you'd be like, I'm just going to get a job, right? I feel like you have to have that in you because the lows are really low and the highs are really high. And you have to keep your eye up instead of down. And you have to have that level of optimism.
Hey guys, this is Ben. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast, not just the marketing and practice building strategies, but the philosophy of the art of living your best life parts, you should know that my son Brian and I have built a tribe of like-minded lawyers who are living lives of their own design and creating tremendous value for the world within the structure of a law practice. We invite you to join us at the only membership organization for entrepreneurial lawyers that is run by 2 full-time practicing attorneys. Check us out at greatlegalmarketing.com.
Let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit of internet because, we can have this. We're recording this, by the way, in July of 2024. So if you listen to it in 3 months, all the answers Conrad's going to give are probably going to be different because everything changes. As you know, Conrad, our market is generally, as I said earlier, it's not the lawyers who are spending tens of thousands of dollars a month on anything that's on almost anything, right? And particularly a particular vertical of marketing. But it does seem to me that every time you and Guy release an episode, something has changed in Google's world that just makes it challenging. And so guys and gals who are running small to medium firms doing anywhere from 800K to 3 million, I'll tell you, if you didn't know this, like they're very frustrated because they hear something new all the time. They try things, but they often don't have the money to fund doing the thing at the very high level that's maybe necessary for the thing. If we're talking about buying pay-per-click ads and being really good at pay-per-click or LSAs and stuff. And you guys get on into process all the time. So help our listeners come up with a framework for thinking about the investment of time and energy into their digital platform, be it website, Google Local, anything else. What do you think is the appropriate, reasonable framework to think about how these lawyers are going to spend their hours and spend their
I think
dollars?
a lot of this starts with 2 really simple elements to understand, but hard to actually analyze. Number one is like, where do you want to go? This is why the annual planning system for EOS makes a ton of sense. It's why we just started Q3 right now. And we're planning, what does the template look like that we bring to our clients who are engaged in EOS? And do we get a seat at their table? When is their annual meeting? Like, my people are literally right now trying to figure out what the calendar is for the annual meeting for our clients who are running EOS. So we should be at that, at least feeding content to whomever holds that seat, or we are there in the room with that seat. And so the answer to your question is like, where do you want to go next year? Right. And some of you want to take over the state. We have clients who look like that. Some of you want to keep the lights on. Those are two very different things. Some of you may be terrified about Morgan & Morgan moving in. Some of you may want to add another location, hire 4 lawyers. Like, what are we trying to do? And I think
do you actually, let me interrupt. Do you actually have a seat in any EOS, any law firm EOS, the marketing seat? So you're in on the quarterlies and the annuals?
What would we be doing? Like,
that's it. I agree. No, I agree, but I hadn't really thought about that.
And the other part is like, and so this is a tangent, but like, there's this weird change where like we have COOs who are really wearing the marketing hat. They're internal COOs who are really wearing the marketing hat, but like we're feeding them and we're supporting them, right? But like, if you're not bringing your agency in, like maybe they're just doing tactical stuff for you, which is fine. And there's someone leading internally, but otherwise, like, yes, of course. And you have to be a good guest, right? You can't come in and like, I think next year you should take over Florida. That's not our job. But like, our job is to understand, if you want to take over Florida, okay, let's come up with the plan and the metrics and the rocks to say that we're actually making that happen.
So the fact that you are EOS trained, and running EOS at Mockingbird, that's got to be dog whistle language to firms who really get it.
Probably. I do think, and I think this is a fair hit. I think firms who are at a level of sophistication, I'm making broad brushstrokes here, where they would be implementing EOS more than 12 or 6 to 12 months in, they probably don't trust marketing people. They probably don't trust agencies. And it takes a lot of trust to get that seat at the table. And I think that lack of trust is well earned by the digital marketing space. And so it's the special client where that happens. But like, I'm headed off to Nashville soon to go and do exactly this, right? And they have a very clear objective. They want to move into a very large city. Okay. So they've been on the periphery. We're all getting together, and it's not just me. We're the digital vendor. We've got offline vendors coming in, and we are working out what is the plan to win this city, right? And it's top 3, right? What is it going to take? And we're all getting together. Like, of course we should do that. And then when you do that, we're bought in to like, okay, these are the things that need to happen over the next 4 quarters. And it goes right into an EOS system. And like, that's how it should work. But you got to work with an agency that you trust. And we have done a terrible job of building trust as an industry.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. But what you just said, like, I hadn't even thought of. It would strike me that telling that story, which you just told, is it's got to be a marketing tool for you. Like,
this is the funny thing, Ben. Like no one is. It's like, this is like writing a will. No one is going out there right now thinking about, I want to write a will today. If you're thinking about writing a will, it's too late. And so no one's proactively looking for that. There are things that people need lawyers for that no one is proactively looking for. I don't think people are looking for like EOS trained digital marketing agency. I think it's a nice when it connects, but it isn't it's not in the psyche of law firms as they're looking for a vendor.
Yeah, out of it. I mean, the fact that, hey, inside some of the most significant law firms in the country, and let me just without disclosing anything proprietary, let me just tell you what they do. They bring their vendors in, and together we think about this problem, and thus avoid the problem of vendor on the left-hand side telling us one thing over here, vendor on the right-hand side, my internal and marketing person telling me something else. We just get in the room and have open and honest and sometimes hard discussions to try to figure this out. So, all right, and I interrupt you. So you said, let's figure out, the advice. Like, where do you want to go, number one?
And the next part, and this is increasingly difficult, especially for the smaller your firm sizes, this is increasingly difficult. What are the marketing channels that I can play in? And what are the marketing channels that I just shouldn't bother? So if you are a two lawyer personal injury firm in downtown Chicago, you've got a brand new website and 0 reviews, you should not play. Don't try and play SEO. Don't try and play local. Just don't, because you'll never win. It's a waste of time. Now that's an extreme example, but like you need to look at and I'm a very big believer that you need to understand and see the entire chessboard and understand all of the pieces in order to determine which piece you actually want to play at any given moment. And sometimes you got to leave the pieces where they stand, right? I'm drawing the analogy way too far, but there are certainly some tactical things that small firms should not be doing that they don't have a chance to ever win at. And you need to stay away from those things. On the flip side, there are some advantages that a small firm has that a Morgan & Morgan can never replicate. And what are those? What channels do I play in? How can I win there while avoiding the pit of competition where you're never going to win, right? Some agencies, some SEO people will be like, I can take any law firm and get them to page 1. No, not for anything that you're going to be hired for. There are no tips and tricks. There's no 3 easy steps. Those opportunities get discovered and exploited and shared so fast that it's hard. It's a hard game. And for me, I love the entrepreneur. I love the scrappiness. I love the visionary. It's become a big budget game in many cases for many channels. And you just need to not play in those channels, right? Play elsewhere.
You've mentioned now several times on the episode about the industry, the agency industry, not having done a good job of garnering trust with customers, in this case, law firms. I'm curious, what you mean by that. And then we'll loop into, Conrad, the eternal question, which is the lawyers who are looking. And again, it's hard because, the pitch is, hey, I'm going to do an SEO audit. You get 5 audits, 5,000 different things that are wrong and screwing with your digital marketing. And then how do we pick? So what do you mean when you say the agency world hasn't done a great job? And then now, how does Mr. and Mrs. Solo and Small Firm Lawyer kind of work through that to find? Again, we're always coaching the best investment of time and money for our market, for our lawyers.
So I feel like the industry, by and large, is run with the perspective of my former classmates who have MBAs, and they're optimizing for the agency instead of their client. And it is a short-term mindset that can be, by the way, it's super profitable. From a business perspective, it can make a lot of sense. It's just not the way I think law firms should hire an agency, and it's not the way I want to run my agency. But you can I'll use some extreme examples. Proprietary technical platforms. You're on a website that you can't get off of, right? You're tied to your agency. That's dumb. You're contractually tied to your agency, even if they are terrible. Also dumb. Why would you do that? It's worse than a marriage, right? And it is a marriage, right? There are lots of ways that agencies, let me use a simplistic example. Agencies like to show up and to the right. Okay. So up and to the right, you're growing, we're doing great. But how many of you are listening? You're like, yeah, my agency is showing me the graph up and to the right. And yet here we are, we're still 4 people 2 years in and nothing's really changed. Let me use 2 really obscene examples of how agencies abuse this. Leads, right? So I know, because I have the data, that 84% of the leads that we generate, 83 to 84% of the leads, phone call, form fill, text, or chat, don't turn into a consultation. So why are you counting leads? But agencies will do things like they're going to count the 7 times that opposing counsel called you through the tracking number that they set up as 7 different leads. It's garbage, right? We put a man on the moon in the 60s. We can clearly figure out that wasn't 7 different leads. It wasn't 1 lead. In fact, it was opposing counsel, right? So we can figure that out. And so agencies will go out of their way to overcount leads when we have the technology to take that problem away really easily. And it's simple. This number has already been seen in our database. Don't count it as a new lead. That's all you have to do, right? So that drives me crazy. Let me use another example. Agencies like to talk about growing traffic as an SEO metric, right? It's a terrible SEO metric. It's a terrible metric for a law firm. So think about this. If my job as an agency, if I've convinced you, Ben, that the thing that we need to do is grow traffic for your site. I'm going to do whatever it takes to grow traffic, regardless of the quality of that traffic. Okay. And so I might put out a bunch of content that's so high up in the funnel or not even in the funnel that it's going to attract visitors, but no one cares. We literally talked to a law firm in New York that was ranking and getting traffic for Brooklyn style pizza because they had written up about a pizza restaurant that did Brooklyn style pizza. And no one is winning that game, but they were never going to hire this law firm. That's stupid, but it gets even more insidious. And this is where agencies really are awful. I've now convinced you, Ben, that you need to see up and to the right. And you know what? The graph has been flat for 2 months. I can go buy you for $10 another 1,200 visits to your website tomorrow, right? And now your graphs look up and to the right. And I told you I'm doing what we're doing. We agreed that the goal here was to drive traffic. And now I'm being insidious. And you will never know. You will never have a clue that I'm actually doing that. And don't have the naivete that that's not happening. That is 100% happening. And that's why I hate this industry, because we get you to look over here at these technical things. We get you to think about things that aren't your business metrics. And then we can absolutely backdoor away. You want followers? Great. Go. I've got 10,000 followers from Uzbekistan, right? Like these things just, it's so bad and it's so rampant. And I hate it. I hate the industry. I love being in it, but overall, it's gross. It's gross. And
it gives you opportunity. And you can look at it from my perspective and look at some of the way lawyers operate their businesses and the way they market their practices. And it is gross and disgusting for some of them, right? But it ends up being opportunity for us. Let me ask you this now: who, like, your next lead, if the perfect avatar lawyer law firm that's calling Mockingbird to say, hey, we'd like to have a discussion. Like, what does that firm or that lawyer look like psychographically, if you want to use that phrase, budget wise, in any metric that you'd like to use? Who's your favorite? That you want to say, hey, I've got a call with such and such.
Yeah.
This is going to be an awesome call.
The best firm is a growth-oriented mindset, and it's genuine growth-oriented mindset, which means you've married your budgeting to your objectives, to where you want to go. You have a realistic. We had a firm, employment law firm in Texas, 2 lawyers, 3 lawyers every year. Conrad, I want to take over Texas. And I'm like, Dan, you got to spend more than $4,000 a month if you want to take over Texas. It's just never going to go anywhere. So like, that was a great example of like, we parted ways because they were never going to get to where they wanted to go because they didn't really want to put into it what was going to happen. The other thing, Ben, that I love, this is not the right sales answer, but I do love this. I like the aggressive firm that has the unfair advantage, right? Like, I'll use employment as an example. There aren't big employment firms, right? Employment tends to be onesie twosies. And so like we've built one of our clients is one of the biggest employment law firms in the country, if not the biggest, depending on what yardstick you want to use. It started with 3 guys, right? And no one's doing employment really well. They are, and they're killing it because of that. So, and it doesn't have to be like, it's not even necessarily practice area. Like you're the firm that does everything in the tertiary market, right? Like I can kill it for you. We like doing personal injury. Like it helps my top line keep going up, and we learn a lot from personal injury. They spend a lot. It's probably 1/3 of our clients and 2/3 of our revenue, our PI. So we'll do that all day long. But I love when I can be like, okay, this personal injury firm, like why? I've talked about this North Carolina firm. Why do they have an unfair advantage? Like, are they doing things differently? Are they willing to come out and not just do the expected stuff? Is there something more behind them? Right. And those firms that are like, we're a little different. We're trying something else. We own the local market. We really care about this. Like I can do stuff with that. When it's just like, I'm another, dude in a suit who wants to keep the lights on.
Well, that's a great, look, so again, if you're listening to this, like rewind the last 90 seconds and ask yourself, like spend some deep thinking time to ask yourself, what is my unfair advantage? Ask your team, what is our unfair advantage? And you may struggle with that. Okay, that's opportunity. Like we can go figure something out. Or you may go, here's our unfair advantage, but gee, are we using it? No. All right, now there's an opportunity to exploit our unfair advantage. That's really, can you give us any other examples generally, Conrad, of
Sure.
what an unfair
It can be your
advantage?
positioning, right? It can be like, I remember that this site, it's not alive anymore, but it was called My LA Jewish Lawyer, right? It's like they've nailed a very specific market, and like most people can't compete with that, right? But like they're leaning totally into positioning. It can be your practice area, right? It can absolutely be your practice area. It can be the goodwill that you have built up in your community. It can be the charismatic approach to the leader. I'll give you another one. This is a guy, I won't name him, but every year for years, he ran on the Libertarian Party, right? So he ran for the Libertarian Party. He did it as an SEO exercise because the press is all taught to cover all the angles, and he made sure that every single story he was covered, which included a link, because all of his political stuff was on his own law firm website. Like, that's an amazing unfair advantage, right? Like, it's things like this. You have to look at things. If you look at everything linear and within this box, you almost have to like go for a long drive or a shower or work out like crazy. And like where is your brain going outside of the expected? Like, it's there. You just have to find it. You have to draw it out. It could be like, you could be pushing women in Sacramento, right? Like, whatever it might be, like, there's so much more to you than I'm a lawyer. Find your unfair advantage. And if you feel you are stuck fighting in a market that is just a bloodbath, it probably is, right? Like, I remember one of my business school lessons, we did this case study, and it was corporate strategy 101 or 4, whatever they call it in grad school. And the whole point of the case, it was amazing. It was the first case that we ever did. And we did it around Alcoa, steel, like building aluminum plants. And the whole class, we're all trying to figure out, like, what should Alcoa do? And what are the unfair advantages? And at the very end, my professor, Alan Afu, I'll never forget this. He was from Cameroon. He's an amazing guy, super thick accent. And he said, students, this industry sucks. Right? They should get out. It just sucks. Right? And sometimes it just sucks. Right? And sometimes you're just in this brutal competitive environment where you have to move into something else where you're not going to get killed.
You know, it's another reason, I think, to get into mastermind groups with non-lawyers, because they can be the ones when you're telling your story, if they ask the right questions, that they can help you discover, like, what is my unfair advantage. Dan Kennedy often tells the story of, being an all-day consult with people, and they finally in the last hour, like, they're telling some wacko story of something that happened in their life with a product. And he's like, that's it. That's the angle here. Conrad, this has been fun as always. You'll be visiting us in a couple of months. I look forward to that. We'll figure out exactly what we're going to do when you are here. If folks listening to this want to have a discussion or continue this discussion with you or someone on your team.
So the good thing is I have a really unique name. So that's like, talk about SEO. We go straight back to SEO. It's SAAM with two A's. And if you can't find me, I'm not doing my job, right? Very easy to find. And I like talking about this stuff.
We didn't even get to the controversial parts and the companies that you hate and love and all that stuff. But we'll do that.
Okay.
We'll do that
yeah,
live
it's
in
gotten
person, maybe.
Gross.
Look, yeah, well, I listened to the
Lunch Hour Legal
Marketing. Again, the lunchtime Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. You guys, like, if you listen to this podcast, you got to add Conrad and Guy's podcast to your mix too. It is really awesome. And then you even referred us to another one that talks a lot about local search. I forget the name of it. You mentioned it.
So to Darren Shaw, Andrew Shotland. There's a bunch of people.
Yeah, it's good. And that's, I think, at the end of the day, the unfair advantage that everything you talk about is an unfair advantage are things that the big giant law firms, they don't really have the capacity, they don't have the willingness to do. Some of this is work. It's one thing to write a big giant check. It's another thing to go and to think deeply about, okay, like, how are we really different, and how could we take advantage here? And then, go take over the state. That's okay too. All right, man.
Thank you, Ben. And I am looking forward to seeing you in August.
Oh,
it's October.
Is it August? October.
No.
Well,
yeah, no. I've got.
It's filled.
Yeah, no. It's October. I think October 10. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
It is October. All right.
Thanks.
If you like what you just heard on the Renegade Lawyer Podcast, you may be a perfect fit for the great legal marketing community. Law firm owners across the country are becoming heroes to their families and icons in their communities. They've gone renegade by rejecting the status quo of the legal profession so they can deliver high-quality legal services coupled with top-notch customer service to clients who pay, stay, and refer. Learn more at greatlegalmarketing.com. That's greatlegalmarketing.com.